Welcome to a new week of material. This week we are talking about Congress. I am going to break up this week's lecture into two. You, of course, are more than welcome to watch it all at once, but I think it would be a little bit more manageable if you broke it up into two sections, especially if you're crunched for time. So, the first we will talk about Congress generally, some kind of formative building blocks, and then we will talk about the process of legislating. And in the second one, we will talk about some congressional history and developments, and then the supplemental reading this week, which is the Benjamin Barber reading. So let's get started. Congress has some very specific features that we need to discuss in order to be able to go any further. There are, as we've talked about before, two branches of Congress. It was part of that great compromise. The Virginia plan suggested what is now our House of Representatives, and the New Jersey plan suggested what is now our Senate, and then we had the Connecticut plan, or the Connecticut Compromise, to come in and give us both. So you can see here how they differ in some very fundamental ways. So the number of members, the House of Representatives, is at 435. Now, theoretically, it could have grown far greater than that, but we capped it at a certain point, and then apportioned the 435 by population. The 100 is based on 2 per state. You can see the presiding officer of each, notably the Senate. The president of the Senate is actually the vice president of the country, but he, or someday she, rarely presides, unless you're watching House of Cards, in which case you know that happened at least once. And usually it is one of the members of Congress that is presiding over the Senate. The House of Representatives differs in that the parties are heavily involved with how leadership is structured. So the Speaker of the House, the presiding officer, is the leader of the majority party. And the Senate is a little less so. There's a little more sense of collegiality that's not found in the House. If you think about it, if you have to get along with 100 people, you're going to act differently than if you need to get along with 435. 435, you're probably not going to talk to everybody. But 100, you're going to have to talk to everybody and work with them. So there's a little more compromise that goes on in the Senate. The primary method of things getting done in the House of Representatives is this whip system, which is an informal system of party control. The committees used to work a lot like this, but in modern times, the whip system is what keeps this in place. And then the Senate has a smaller one, and it's a little more independent by actor. So what is this whip system? Well, it's an informal, sometimes formal, but it's a leadership system between parties and their members. And it keeps these members in line, and it's kind of a 3-part process. So they will, when a piece of legislation is new, they'll do kind of an informal or soft poll to see where everybody stands on it. When things are getting a little more serious, they may start making suggestions to their members of how to vote. And finally, towards the end, they do some formal counts to see where the party stands as a whole. So really, it's a counting mechanism. And there are a lot of assistant whips. There's a majority whip and a minority whip, which are primary stakeholders in each party, but then there are assistant positions below them. And then there are the committees. And the committees are where work is supposed to happen. These are smaller bodies within each chamber that do the work of marking up legislation, holding hearings, making amendments to legislation. Some of this can be done on the floor of Congress, but it's really done in the committees. There are 2 types of committees, at least 2 ways to rank them. One is based on permanence. So you have standing committees that are always in existence, so things like Armed Services Committee or Agricultural Committee. And then you have the short-term select committees. So the select committee investigating Benghazi is a select committee. You can have a select committee that eventually becomes standing, but it is not always the case that will happen. And then you have another way of ranking these committees, which is based on prominence. So in the House, committees that deal with finance, ways and means, budget committee, etc., those are kind of the top committees, whereas some of the smaller ones deal with a limited set of issues like Veterans Affairs or Postal Committee or that type of thing. And depending on which theory you subscribe to, the reason that members engage in committee work varies. So the first theory we have is this distributive theory. And that is a theory that really works based on representative reelection. So members choose to get on committees that are relevant to their districts so that they have something to tout come reelection time. So a representative from Michigan would try and get on the Energy Committee because of the auto industry. An informational theory is kind of the reverse. It would be how committees are distributed based on the needs of Congress, not on the basis of what individual members need. So committees in that sense would exist to gather information, and that you would have a representative from Michigan on the Energy and Commerce Committee, not for their reelection purposes, but because they actually might be able to provide some information as to what the auto industry is doing. These are just two theories, though, and they can definitely work in tandem. But when you think about the role of committees, these two theories are kind of the main ones out there. So let's talk about how a bill becomes a law.
Whew, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will, but today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." Then he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law. I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be a law. I hope and pray that they will, but today I am still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to report on me favorably, otherwise I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm gonna live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I'll wait in a line with a lot of other bills for the president to sign. And if he signs me, then I'll be a law. How I hope and pray that he will. But today I am still just a bill.
You mean even if the whole Congress says you should be a law, the president can still say no?
Yes, that's called a veto. If the president vetoes me, I have to go back to Congress and they vote on me again, and by that time you're so
By
old.
that time, it's very unlikely that you become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
He signed your bill. Now you're a law.
Oh, yes.
So that was, as many of you have seen before, the old schoolhouse rock, How a Bill Becomes a Law. And that is actually a good summary of how it's supposed to happen. But there are a few key things that are left out. So the next video I'm going to show you kind of fills in some of those gaps. So, as you can see, there's a lot more than that typical schoolhouse rock uh, pattern. But we'll start from there and build upon that as we move along. I just wanted you to keep in mind that not everything moves as smoothly as it should. So, these are the steps that it takes for a bill to become a law. Now, obviously, there are things that can't be captured in this. One is the fact that most things don't make it to the last step. Although I tried to do that with the colors getting lighter and lighter each time, so you could see that as time moves on, it's less likely for a bill to survive. But what you don't see is that many bills are never introduced. They may be written, they may be posted and talked about in the press, but there are many bills that are never introduced, and there are many bills that don't follow this simple process. But let's break down that process a little bit and talk about where maybe some of these pitfalls may occur. So step one is introduction by a sponsor. A sponsor is any member of Congress who presumably writes the bill, or these days usually his or her staff would write the bill. It cannot be the president. Most people get confused about this, thinking, well, why can't the president just do something? Well, because the president can't introduce legislation. If the president wants something to get done, he needs someone to introduce it for him. So usually, though, you want to get co-sponsors, people who agree to put their name on the bill right up front. And so that shows broad support. Usually, it's even better if you can get bipartisan support for a bill. Steps 2 and 3 both have to do with the committee work that comes next. So right off the bat, the Speaker of the House, presuming, for the sake of this, that the bill originates in the House, the Speaker of the House assigns the bill to one or more committees. The committees can hold hearings, change language, and determine ultimately if the bill should move forward or not. Most bills die in committee. So you did see that in the Schoolhouse Rock video, but I think it kind of underplays how many do in fact die there. And part of the reason some of them die is this idea of multiple referrals. Multiple referrals is a modern practice where the Speaker of the House will assign a bill to multiple committees, sometimes simultaneously. So some pieces will go to one committee, some pieces will go to another, or sometimes, a bill will go to the Energy Committee first, then the Transportation Committee, and so on. Sending it to multiple committees adds to the chances that it won't survive. So every committee you have to go through is another hurdle. Presuming you make it out of your original committee or committees, your bill comes back to the floor and is then sent to what is called the Rules Committee in the House. The Rules Committee in the Senate does not have the same function, so this is definitely something that comes out of the House of Representatives. The Rules Committee must decide how the entire body can vote on it. And what I mean by this is they determine, this small group of the larger whole determines how all 435 members of the House of Representatives, how many amendments can be made while the bill is on the floor, how much time the bill can be talked about, and who can talk about the bill. So sometimes, if it's a bill that you want to get through quickly, you make very restrictive rules so that people can't add things to it or take things away. Likewise, if you don't want the bill to succeed, you may pull some of the same type of maneuvering. The reason why this is important is the Rules Committee is heavily controlled by the Speaker of the House, who, as I mentioned before, is the head of the party that has the most members in the House of Representatives. So the Rules Committee is really used to shape policy. So once you come out of the Rules Committee, whatever the rule says that goes along with your bill, you go to the floor, and that's how the entire House deals with the bill. So depending on how much time they're allotted and how many amendments and so on, that's when those things can happen. Also important, the Speaker of the House is the one who gets to schedule what bills come up when. And so if the Speaker of the House doesn't like your bill, because maybe you are in the opposition party or have just angered the Speaker, don't expect your bill to come up anytime soon. Unless you've entered into some negotiations to get it up. The Speaker controls the schedule, and so the majority party has a large berth to do what they want. Next, presuming you get through your chamber and get your bill approved, it has to go to the opposite chamber. So if we started in the House, it then has to go to the Senate. Both chambers must pass the exact same language. If there is any difference in the language, either you have to send it back to the opposite chamber with new proposed language, or what can happen, although it's rarer in modern times, is this conference committee. And the conference committee is where the leaders of both chambers, the House and the Senate, select members to sit on a committee between the two of them and hammer out a compromise version of the bill. They still have to approve that version of the bill, so that compromise version still has to go back to the House and the Senate to be voted on. But then presumably it's the same language in both versions. And then, and only then, when you have a bill that is exactly the same, approved by the House and approved by the Senate, can the bill be presented to the President. The President may sign the bill or veto the bill. There's also such a thing called a pocket veto, which we'll talk about when we talk about the presidency, but it's essentially just putting it off at the end of a term. But signing the bill or vetoing the bill is the only option. If the President vetoes the bill, which President Obama recently did with an attempt to repeal Obamacare, I think it was the 60th attempt. They finally got the votes they needed, and President Obama vetoed the bill. Congress can override the veto if they get 2/3 majority vote in both chambers. So 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate. This is very rare, and most Congresses can't count on that kind of support for pretty much anything. So in the next section, we will talk about the changes over time that have occurred in Congress.